today in Rich in Relationship. We're going to talk about
how to turn all those juicy insights you're having about yourself and your relationship into something concrete, something that's going to make a difference. Real transformation starts with personal accountability. As we create strategies and processes for ourselves in the relationship, we actually change the relationship. Welcome to another episode of Rich in Relationship, and I'm your host, Rich Heller, and today we are literally turning insights into actions, redefining your role in your relationship. And I want to be clear, it's not just your role. Their role changes as your role changes. You know, my wife was sharing with me the other day that there was a quality of her relationship with her mom where she was feeling very criticized and attacked, and she created a strategy for managing that. And the second that she created and acted on that strategy, she almost didn't need it anymore. It's almost as if her mom sensed that whatever vulnerability there was in the past was gone, and so she wasn't going to go there anymore. What I'm telling you is, as we create strategies and processes for ourselves in the relationship, we actually change the relationship. And so even though the title of this episode is Redefining Your Role, it really should be Redefining You and Your Partner's Role by Redefining Your Role. But that's a mouthful from an SEO point of view. So let me ask you a question. Have you ever gained insight into your emotions and the dynamics of your relationship, but you're not sure how to implement them? You feel frustrated by the slow progress or unmet expectations you have. You feel like, I know all this. Why isn't it changing? Well, this episode explores how to turn those very insights, those things that you're learning and knowing about yourself and your relationship, your partnership, into meaningful actions by setting intentional goals, by focusing your attention, by building habits and managing expectations about the change process. We're also going to discuss the difference between baby steps, incremental growth, and like a whole mindset paradigm shift, and knowing when to reach out and get support. So where do we begin here? Let's start with this. This episode is episode 13 in a 20 episode series that we're doing. And the starting point for this was that when we allow ourselves to be distracted, when we allow our attention being our conscious and unconscious direction, to be distracted, we see diminishing returns in ourselves and in our relationship. And just as a reminder, what we started talking about was back in episode 1, which was 5 weeks ago. You can go through the whole series if you want. In episode 1 and 2, we were exploring a lot our relationship with screens and how there's a correlation between when television first became a regular thing in American society and the advancement of television to computers and the melding of television and computers into screens as we now experience them, with the growth of all of these tools, which can also be distractions, came a correlation in the divorce rate. Now, I want to be really clear. Correlation does not mean cause. But what it means is there is something about where we are putting our attention that has everything to do with what's going on in our relationship. And what we drew out in the earlier episodes was that when we allow our attention to be on content that stimulates our fight, flight, or play dead part of our brain, that part develops and grows and becomes more attentive is probably the best way to put it. And when we focus on content that's about personal development, emotional development, this podcast would be an example of that, then our prefrontal and cerebral cortex grows, and we have better ability to choose, because the amygdala, the part that's about fight, flight, or play dead, is all emotion, very little rational mind, and it's programmed. It runs on a program, whereas our prefrontal cortex gets to decide where we're driving ourselves emotionally. And there's a lot of content on this I'm not going to rehash, but I want to make sure that as we go through this episode, that you get that the first thing you need to do is define, who do you want to be in your partnership? This episode is about setting goals for yourself that impact your relationship. And so if anything that I've said resonates with you as, ooh, yeah, maybe I am playing video games too much, or, ooh, maybe I am having an affair with my AI, like that's on the extreme end, or maybe I am watching too much kung fu movies, or maybe I am too busy buying things, or maybe I am watching pornography, or maybe in some way I've allowed my attention to go to ways that we can use screens to trigger a dopamine response in ourselves, and we're doing it unconsciously. So it's one thing, let's just equate screens with alcohol, which is legal for a second, or marijuana, which is legal for a second in many states. When we make a choice that we're going to have a drink or a hit, we know what we're doing and why we're doing it. But when we just do it automatically and don't think about how much we're drinking or how much we're smoking, and it becomes habitual, our unconscious mind slips into a pattern of unconscious self-gratification, and we withdraw more and more from our conscious goals and the things that are really important to us. Screens have become like that for many of us. Maybe not for you. Maybe just a little bit. I can testify that for me, I'm constantly monitoring my relationship with screens. When am I going to allow myself? How much am I going to allow myself? To what end am I going to allow myself? It's a very conscious process in many ways, but I have to work at it. And so you may be working at it also. The first step to working at it is deciding, where do you want to go? Do I want to be an unconscious person, or do I want to be fully present and conscious? If you're waiting for your partner to change, or the question is, are you ready to define who you want to be in the relationship? Let me say that again. Are you waiting for your partner to change, or are you ready to define who you want to be in the relationship? Real transformation starts with personal accountability. That's what I've been rambling about when it comes to screens. Reflect on the qualities you want to embody as a person, as a partner. Set actionable goals to align with the vision. Now, we've been talking about in previous episodes that for a partnership to work, there needs to be compassion. For a partnership to work, there needs to be patience. For a partnership to work, there needs to be curiosity. For a partnership to work, there needs to be safety, trust. For there to be intimacy, there needs to be vulnerability, and all those things need to be in place. And if that's what you want, you make a conscious decision, and then you make a decision to act with purpose. Right? So you can choose something, you have knowledge that you want it, but if you don't act with purpose, you're not going to get there. If you decide that you want to go to the grocery store to buy some guacamole, but you never get in the car, you're never going to have the guacamole. I'm particularly fond of guacamole. What does it mean to take ownership of your role in a relationship? It begins with a clear decision about the kind of partner you want to be. And with that decision about the kind of partner you want to be, you'll also be defining the kind of partner you want. And that's an important piece, right? If we're doing everything right, but our partner still doesn't get it, it just isn't clicking, then maybe we need to re-examine the relationship itself. But the starting point always is us. So here's a tip. Write down a specific goal that aligns with your values. So if your value is to create safety and trust, a goal might be, I'm going to listen so that I understand them. And should a defensive reaction comes up, I'm going to chill it out. I'm just going to listen and understand that. By the way, that is an amazing goal. It sounds so simple, really challenging to the most disciplined of us. Have you noticed how distractions like unconscious screen use pull you away from meaningful connection? Where your attention goes shapes what grows in your life. Screens and distractions often feed reactive behaviors, we pointed out earlier. If we really want to be present, we need to manage our relationship with screens. We need to manage our relationship with books. And we need to make sure that, we need to manage our relationship with work. We need to make sure that there's what they call balance, that there's a place, room for personal development in our relationship. And if you're hearing this going, well, I have that, I want you to really think about it, because the normal development of a relationship is once children become present, focusing on that relationship becomes a real challenge because you've got the learning curve of child care, child development, and balancing everything out in relationship to that. When something new and big comes, it's not unusual for something to fall to the side. And very often it's the relationship. Sometimes it's personal care. Putting ourselves first is really important. So I want you to just take a quick assessment of what are the distractions in your life right now. And let me lay out some priorities that came out of the pandemic from when I was working with couples. In the pandemic, when the stuff was up against the fan and flying all over the place, and people were working from home for the first time, and they had their kids learning from home, they had to juggle all those balls. What we discovered working together was the first thing they had to take care of was themselves. Because in order to take care of other things, their battery needed to be 100% charged. We're not even talking about expanding the battery. We're talking about making sure their battery was charged. And the first part of the battery that needs to be charged is, where am I focusing my attention? If my attention is distracted by things that give me immediate gratification, then it's harder for me to do the other things I need to take care of myself. The work, going to the gym is not immediate gratification for most people. For some people, it is. For most people, it's the result of the gym that drives them to the gym. So taking care of ourselves looks like, where's my attention? Is my attention on getting enough sleep? Basic physiology 101. Is my attention on eating right? Is my attention on getting regular exercise? Is my attention on developing my mind? After we've taken care of ourselves, actually, I'm going to add to that. Is my attention on making sure that I have healthy connection, social relationships? And that's the next thing we're going to take care of is, where is my relationship? Now that I've taken care of myself, how is my partnership? What do I need to make sure my partnership is moving forward, is at least on an even keel, if not advancing? Because when I have a strong partnership, we can manage the aspects of our lives better. So in the pandemic, when people did this, they had themselves taken care of and their partnership taken care of, just so that it's maintained, not even getting better. Then they and their partner could take care of the kids, which is the family is the next priority. And then what they found was that work naturally fell into place. When they had these other things tuned up and working and crack-a-lacking, they always got their work done. But what people often did before they came to me was they had work first, they had kids second, they had themselves third, and their partnership last. And the partnership was often the thing that dropped off, and their self-care dropped off, and they were frustrated and tired and angry because they couldn't take care of their work and they couldn't take care of their kids because their battery wasn't charged and they didn't have a partner. That's why priorities: me, us, them, work. All right. So let's start with me. This series is all about our attention. So I want you to think about, what would it be like to create an intentional screen-free zone, several in your life. It might be during meals. Actually, it should be 2 hours before you go to bed, right? If the next thing is to get good sleep, studies show that watching screens within an hour of going to bed makes your sleep less fulfilling. So technically, by the way, I want you to know this is a goal for me. I'm pretty bad at this. I watch screens about an hour before I go to bed instead of 2. Working on it, folks. You start with screen-free meals. Maybe date night is screen-free. Maybe when you and your partner are sitting down together, unless you're calendaring, you're screen-free. Maybe when you're talking to your kids about things that are important, you're screen-free. Start with that. Notice when you want to turn to screens. It's inevitably going to be when you're having a stressful conversation, or when you're feeling tired or hungry or hangry, when you're feeling lonely. Our habit now, most of us who have screens in our lives, is to reach for those screens. If you want to break those reactive habits, it's important, as I said in the last episode, to have mindfulness, meditation, and or prayer. You want to have times where you're refocusing your mind, refocusing your attention. These tools of mindfulness, meditation, and prayer are ways to refocus our attention. Since attention is probably on the top of the list here, once you've made the decision, this is the thing I want you to focus on most. I'd say set aside limiting screens when you're having a one-to-one conversation with your partner. That's important, really important. Maybe when you're driving, you let that one go or whatever. It's really easy to get insulted that they're on a screen. You want to let it go. Just keep it simple. And you want to work on, if you're getting insulted or hurt when they're on screens, you want to work on what's going on with me. That's stressful for me. How can I be more accepting of that? And mindfulness, meditation, and prayer are the way through. 5 minutes a day is like a great beginning for this. And I want to make sure you understand, we're talking about building habits here. Most of the changes that are about refocusing our attention are about building new habits. And we don't want to take on too many habits at once, because that'll suck the energy out of our ability to focus. We only have so much focal energy. If you want to build habits for lasting change, then you're really going to need to think about what's the number one habit, number two habit, number three habit. You got to prioritize. I mean, meaningful change can feel overwhelming. The key is to have small, consistent steps that reinforce new behaviors over time. You start with micro habits, like expressing one compliment to your partner daily, or meditating for 5 minutes, or getting off screens for a certain period of time. Another way to take this would be if you do what's called habit stacking. That means taking something that you're already doing habitually and stacking something on top of it. What's an example I can give you from my own life? I have stacked onto brushing my teeth the habit of considering what's coming up next in my day so I can prioritize it. I might be brushing my teeth with my phone there on the sink, not in a puddle, hopefully. And so I stacked that on so that because toothbrushing is relatively mindless, and so it's automatic. I've been doing it for decades. And so I can think about these other things while I'm doing that, checking in to make sure I get every quadrant, et cetera, while I'm doing it. Stacking habits is a great way to introduce a new habit and build on the force of an old habit. Habits literally rewire your brain. They turn intentional actions into automatic behaviors and strengthen your connection. I want you to manage your expectations about the change process. You've got a lot of understanding. If you've been listening to this podcast episode, there's about 20 habits you're going to want to change. Start with the really simple ones. Maybe make a plan of action for what you want to change, because each habit you're going to add is an incremental change. Now, you may find that you're coming up against it. You may find that you're frustrated that change is slow and uneven. Just remember that sustainable change often happens incrementally and not through dramatic results. And at the same time, there's a limit to how much incremental change we can create without actually changing the way we think about ourselves, the way we think about the changes we're making, the way we think about our partner, right? That would be like a paradigm shift, or a major mindset change, or here, Rich in Relationship, we call it letting go of old emotions and old assumptions. Sometimes we want to start a new habit and we're running up against an internal resistance or self-sabotage. That is usually an indicator that we have some old emotions. We need to make a major paradigm shift. So if you're finding that you're really meeting a lot of resistance with incremental change over a period of time, if you find that you're slipping back to old behaviors, you may need a major tune-up. And we've talked in this podcast series about mental and emotional release as a means of doing that. We've got some other tools that are slower and more DIY that we share with some of our clients who want to take a slower road. The purpose of any tool we give people in regard to mindset shift is identify the emotions that are supporting an assumption or limiting belief that's keeping us from implementing internal change. You may experience at this time frustration over your partner's lack of change. In fact, some of your own self-sabotage frustration may show up as frustration with them. It is normal and natural to slip into blame. Or it might be that you're changing, but your partner isn't keeping up. You need to remember that inspiring change in your partner is first about proving that the change is A, for real, and B, consistent. They will not step up unless the change in you feels rock solid. Remember that example I gave you about my wife and her mom? Her mom sensed that the change in my wife was rock solid, and so she automatically adjusted her strategy to what was happening there, and they have a better relationship for it. So if you feel a little frustrated, it might be that your own stuff is getting in your way and you're projecting it on them. Or it might be that the change you've made doesn't feel solid enough to them. And that really depends on how many boundaries you violated in the past, how much trust there actually is present in the relationship. If the relationship is in a high level of overwhelm, see the previous episode about 10 episodes back on relationship overwhelm. There's 7 levels of overwhelm. If your relationship is in a high level of overwhelm, it's going to take a lot of time before enough trust is established to bring it down to DEFCON 6, DEFCON 5, etc. The trick here is to celebrate small wins. If you focus on the goal too much, and the gap between where you are and the goal, you're going to feel like you're not moving. You want to focus on where you were and where you are and the incremental wins and celebrate the small wins. So if you feel like you're getting stuck and you need help, you can always reach out to us. We've got free calls available to you at richinrelationship.com. I find myself needing to say, don't schedule the free call unless you're serious about wanting the help. We really, sometimes we get people who schedule calls on the calendar and a week later, they're like, oh, I'm not so serious anymore. I want you to really know that you want this help. I do this. It's missional for me. My family was upside down. I want your family to be right side up. The people that I get on calls with always progress. If they feel like the progression is adequate and the fit is good, we work more together. If they feel like the progression is adequate and the fit's not so good, we find another next step besides working together. The purpose of the call is not to sell you something. The purpose of the call is to help you choose the next step that's right for you in moving forward in your goal, to accelerate your growth. So I want you to make sure that your efforts are paying off. Regular reflection keeps you aligned with the goal. Check in weekly, evaluate what's working, what's not, what needs adjustment, and what doesn't. Use these insights to refine your approach. If you're feeling stuck, check it out. Is it you? Is it them? Or are you just not celebrating the small wins? Maybe you're too focused on the future. Celebrate the small wins, but most important, you need to identify, do you feel like you're 100% all into the change that you're making in yourself to moving towards that perfect relationship? Or do you find yourself being derailed or sabotaged? If the answer is derailed and sabotage, go to my website, richinrelationship.com. Check us out. We've got tools there. And as I said, I've got a free call for you. I'd love to meet you and talk to you and help you in your journey. Stay tuned because we are going to continue on this series. The next step is staying strong. It's how to overcome setbacks and stay motivated when you're in love. Until I meet you again, have a wonderful tomorrow and an awesome today.